generations to come.
Welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room. I'm Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, and play a little fun game in the beginning of this before we go around the table. My favorite Breeders' Cup race, the Tistaff Thorpedo Anna. It wasn't much of a race after the two good horses, Idiomatic and Adair Manor, came out, but the Queen proved that she was going to do it. She got out there and did it. She's Horse of the Year.
I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports, ready with some pretty strong opinions that will be sure to inflame some people. Among them, my favorite race on Saturday was the Classic because it punctured the balloon of uncontrollable hype, which we'll talk about later.
Ooh.
Oh, so we've got uncontrollable hype. We've got Thorpedo Anna for Horse of the Year, and we're only 30 seconds in. All right, it's my go. I'm Zoe Cadman with First Racing and xbtv. I'm here at Keeneland for the November sale. And I have to say my favorite Breeders' Cup race was Lake Victoria.
Oh.
Absolutely dominating. I can watch that replay over and over and over. She is electric. The fact they brought their best horse here was amazing. She's phenomenal.
That was really something.
Yeah.
All right. So, guys, let's kick it off with a discussion of the Classic. We're not going to go through all 14 races. We would keep our listeners here all day long if we did that. Classic was a really good race, as expected, and I have many opinions on this. But I think, and I'm sure Randy and Zoe would probably agree with this, the difference this time around was the pace. And Sierra Leone, who was always running well but could just never quite get there, got the pace of her dreams. 22.43, 44.96 up front. And she was able to then pass Fierceness. Who I think we want to talk a lot about this quite a bit. The horse that ran the best race was Fierceness. That he was that close to those fractions and hung in there for second. I thought he ran a tremendous race. But nonetheless, City Leone is the winner. That's how we, Sierra Leone is the winner. That's how we look at these things. And again, I don't want to throw out too much at once, but kind of an interesting Eclipse Award battle between Sierra Leone and Fierceness. I think I'd have to go for Sierra Leone. Randy?
Yeah, I mean, I share your opinion about Fierceness. I thought given the pace scenario, he was the best horse in the race. The pace was exceptionally fast. Not as fast as the fractions on the board, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but one of, if not the fastest pace scenarios in Classic history. And I thought it was an incredibly formful race. Okay, let's talk about that part of it, the Americans first, before we get into City of Troy. The idea that the 3-year-olds this year, which was sort of propagated in Europe, are not really of super top quality. It was absolutely fallacious because the Travers Stakes at Saratoga, buyer speed figure for Fierceness in that race of 111 was the fastest Travers buyer other than Arrogate since you have to go all the way back to Bernardini in 2006 to find a faster Travers, right? Fierceness, a very good horse. Sierra Leone, a very good horse. Forever Young, we knew from the Kentucky Derby, his only career defeat, a very good horse. And we were told by the trainer when he got here, and it made sense, that with all the travels going into the Kentucky Derby, that Forever Young was not 100% for that race, but he would be on Saturday. And he ran the race of his life, right? An extremely formful race. If you had been told beforehand that the pace would be 22 and change, 45 and 109 and change, and Fierceness would be right on top of the pace, how much would we have bet on Sierra Leone in that scenario, right? Finally getting the pace, that kind of a pace that he hasn't gotten in a long time. So I thought it was a fantastic Classic, lived up to expectations. More on City of Troy later. Zoe?
Yeah, City of Troy was disappointed, but not unexpected. He didn't jump. I mean, poor Aiden can blame himself all he wants for him not jumping, but he just, at the end of the day, he was not quick enough. I listened to the Nick Luck Daily podcast, and he had Adam Mills on from Total Performance Data, and they measure strides and stride analysis and how fast they're going. Sometimes there's too much data. But he looked up some of the data, his like 0 to 30 miles an hour data that they had from his last race in York and his one at Del Mar. And I think he went 5.8 seconds to get to 30 miles an hour at Del Mar, but at York, a full second faster, 4.8. And that was due to the kickback and the stutter step at the start. It was all over at the start for City of Troy. They said he didn't handle the track. He didn't like the kickback. I'm not quite buying that, because at one point he was so far back, I don't think he was even getting any kickback per se. There is that picture of him with his eyes closed, but horses are smart. I mean, that's just a shutter camera moment where you catch the horse with his eyes. You could take that picture 7 days a week and you're probably going to get the same picture. So City of Troy was a task. Sierra Leone got the pace to run at. Fierceness was as brave as an ox. It was a really, really good race. And Flavien Prat punctuated his Eclipse Award with the win in the Classic.
Well, I think Randy's frothing at the mouth to talk more about City of Troy. And so I'm going to throw it back to him. Everything, Zoe, you just said is all true. Actually, him not getting out of the gate that rapidly, in some respects, might have been, even though he ran terrible, might have been a blessing in disguise, because if he too was involved in that rapid pace up front, I think that would have led to his demise as well. So, Randy, we have a tendency in this game to overhype horses. But when you have Aidan O'Brien saying the best horse I've ever trained, people pay attention to that sort of thing. I think that was a little bit of a salesman's job to, okay, get ready. We're going to send this new sire over there, and he's so good, he's going to be the next Galileo. Well, he's going to be a great sire, but he's just not going to be a sire of dirt horses.
Aidan O'Brien very predictably fell on the sword after the race, claiming that it was his fault that he didn't train the horse properly, which, of course, couldn't be farther from the truth. This is a turf horse. He's not a dirt horse. He's bred on the bottom side to be exclusively turf. He looks like a turf horse. He didn't break that slowly from the starting gate. He broke about a length behind the horses around him, and then he had absolutely nothing. He got no traction. He was back there with Senor Buscador, for crying out loud. The horse did not.
And Sierra Leone.
And Sierra Leone. The horse did not handle dirt at all. And that was extremely predictable going in, right? And we talked about it. I'm kicking myself for not hitting it even harder on NBC than I did before the race. If he had handled dirt like Justify handled dirt, he still wouldn't have hit the board. He wouldn't have beaten Fierceness. He wouldn't have beaten Sierra Leone. He wouldn't have beaten Forever Young, right? This horse is probably the most overhyped horse in Breeders' Cup history. Now, look, he's obviously a talented horse. I'm not saying he's not a talented horse. He's got a beautiful pedigree. Hopefully, he'll live up to Coolmore's expectations in the Stallion Barn, and he'll be that generational stallion that they're desperately hoping for after Sadler's Wells and after the late Galileo. It's what Coolmore really, really needs. And maybe City of Troy will be that. But look, I shopped everywhere in Las Vegas to try to find a prop for the last place finisher in the Classic. And if I could have gotten 15 or 20 to 1, I was going to bet 1,000 or 2 on City of Troy. I'm really glad I didn't find it, because I would have lost money, but I would have gotten a thrill at about the 3/8 pole. He was never going to win the Classic. He was never going to hit the board in the Classic. And the fact that he was the morning line favorite and went off at a little under 4 to 1 is just ludicrous.
Yeah. Coolmore. Yeah, I'll send you around his number right now. Yeah, no problem. All right, Charlie. Yeah, we'll speak to you later.
It's all about opinions. That was my opinion beforehand, and it's even more my opinion now.
Yeah, that's awesome. It was a good race, and to see Sierra Leone and Fierceness run as well as they both did was brilliant. And the fact that they're going to come back as 4-year-olds is even better. Give us something to root on. And
now I'm going to make Zoe mad. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Total performance data is so inaccurate, they can't even get within 2 or 3/5 of a second in races starting from point A to point B. The thought that they can get stride length or anything like that accurate at all
I don't know the guy, I've got no idea. I just thought it was interesting.
They brought their stuff over here. That's GMAX. That's total performance data. That's the timing of the races that they've tried to do over here.
What is the actual time of the race? Let's get into this.
Well, let's get into that later. I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but we will get into the final time was accurate. But that's because it had nothing to do with total performance data.
Now, there's another subject, pretty important subject that we haven't covered here. Can you actually believe there were some people out there saying it was a good idea to run next in the Breeders' Cup? What kind of fool would say that sort of thing? One thing got 34 lengths.
Thank you for reminding us. Thank you for reminding us. And kudos to Bill Cowens and the ownership group for running him, because that was very sportsmanlike. And it's your damn fault, Randy. Not Randy, Bill. It's your fault, Bill.
They had nothing to lose.
I would have given him kudos if they hadn't run him. Look, I mean, it was proven conclusively that this horse does not want any part of fast-paced races on dirt or grass. 4 times in his career, he had been tried in races in which the opening quarter went 22 and change. His average was 11th by 20 lengths beaten. In the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as a 2-year-old, he ran in one of those races. He was dead last, right? Then they finally find what this horse wants to do, where he's not a high-price claiming horse. And he's the most dominant dirt marathon horse in the world. And he's loving it. And he can run through a brick wall. And he's got all this self-confidence. And what do? They throw him back into races where he has absolutely no chance. The poor horse.
Bill's
coming down the stretch the first time, this horse was in such a panic that as they got close to the finish line the first time, I watched him change leads back and forth 3 times in 5 seconds. He was like, what the hell is going on here? Thankfully, Machado, the jockey, eased him in the stretch. It's the kind of situation which horses can get injured when they're running in races like this that they have no business running in. And hopefully it didn't destroy his confidence. And when they run him back in marathon races, he'll be physically okay and he'll be mentally okay. But just the poor horse. I feel so sorry for him being put in that spot.
He didn't know he lost by 52 lengths or whatever. He just had his oats and his hay after the race and went back about his
he knew something was wrong going down the stretch the first time. I promise you.
Yeah, I just shake my head that some people actually thought that was a good idea.
Okay. You didn't run him in that race, Bill. It was not your decision.
Okay. By the way, before we get into the next topic, I want to remind everybody around the holiday time, we'll be taking a couple weeks off and are going to try to get some shows done in advance. We'd love to hear from our viewers. If you have any questions for any of us, any rabbit hole questions for Randy, any questions about anything for Zoe or myself, please contact the Thoroughbred Daily News at Sue Finley at thetdn.com, and we'll put our heads together and answer those questions. So once again, we want to hear from you. Send them in to Sue Finley at thetdn.com.
Do want to remind you that the TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. This past weekend, we saw excellence on racing's biggest stage from 3 of Keeneland's sales graduates with More Than Looks, who took the Breeders' Cup Mile. Moira, make sure we say it right, it's Moira, got up for a win in the filly and Mare Turf, and Citizen Bull won the Juvenile. Their achievements underscore the special connection between Keeneland and racing's elite moments. And as the Keeneland November sale gets away, just started about half an hour ago, you can check out all of the updates that the Breeders' Cup has generated at november.keeneland.com. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
Looking for bloodstock that shapes the world? You can find it here. Foundation mares that will shape the breed. Weanlings with prime potential. Your next moment in the winner's circle. It's all waiting for you here at the world's marketplace. Keeneland November Breeding Stock Sale, where the future is found. Beginning Tuesday, November 5th.
Fastest horse of the week, brought to you by the Fast Sires at Windstar Farm. And this week, that happens to be Constitution, His 2-year-old son, Chasing Liberty, won the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance Stakes on the Breeders' Cup undercard. Chasing Liberty is now 3 for 4 lifetime, and Constitution is having success not only on the turf, across the board. He's a top 5 general sire, turf sire, sire of 3-year-olds. Sold 3 7-figure horses at Keeneland September. And despite all that success, the stud fee for 2025 for Constitution at Windstar Farm wasn't upped at all. It stays at $110,000. Now, the fastest horse of the week, to nobody's surprise, of course, we've already talked about him, and that would be Sierra Leone for his victory in the Breeders' Cup Classic, Buyer Speed Figure 112, which means that runner-up Fierceness ran the same number that he got in the Travers Stakes. A strong bunch of 3-year-olds this year, and they ran 1, 2, 3 in the Breeders' Cup Classic, topped, of course, by Sierra Leone.
This week's guest is none other than Kevin Attard, who had a beautiful day on Saturday at the Breeders' Cup as he won the Breeders' Cup filly and Mare Turf with Moira. Some bittersweet news the next day when she sells, but for $4.3 million at Fasig-Tipton in the November sale. And Kevin, thanks for joining us. And this is sort of an obvious question, but I'll give you a chance to put it in your own words. First King's Plate / Queen's Plate winner. First Canadian Horse of the Year. First Grade 1 winner. First everything for this horse. How much did she mean to you in your operation?
Well, thank you for having me on first and foremost. And obviously a very special horse, definitely a lot of firsts. Being Canadian growing up, at Woodbine being my home base, the Queen's Plate, at the time it was run as the Queen's Plate, now the King's Plate. But that's the kind of race on the calendar. Everybody, our version of the Canadian Kentucky Derby in a sense. Hard race to win, and luckily enough, she fell into my lap, and she gave me my first Queen's Plate win in track record time. So pretty special, and then for her to kind of come on along and a couple of years later, here we are winning a Breeders' Cup with her. Never would have imagined.
Well, Kevin, I guess if you have to say goodbye to her, these are pretty darn good circumstances. You win $1 million Breeders' Cup purse, right? Well, the winner's share was $1 million. So she's a Breeders' Cup winner. The next day or whatever, she sells for $4.3 million at Fasig-Tipton. What's it going to be like? What is it like right now to have to say goodbye to her?
Well, right now it's extremely difficult, no doubt about it. For our stable, our barn, these type of horses don't come by often. And to have a horse that did so many firsts like her, there's obviously that sentimental attachment and love to her. And, cultivating it all in the Breeders' Cup, a dream come true in a sense. Now to have to kind of watch her go, one of the most hardest things I've had to do in horse racing. The love and the bond that you grow for these horses, it's hard to explain. And I don't think people realize how much we care for these animals, how much we appreciate them. And, here's a horse that ran 17 times, 15 times in the money, all stake races, laid it out each and every time. What more could I have asked her to do?
When you first came on about 5 minutes ago, I asked you how you celebrated last night with, the big auction price. And you simply said, with a lot of Kleenex.
Yeah.
Such an emotional time for you last night. And it was something different to watch her go through the ring at Hillendale. Who actually took her through the ring? Because that was really cool.
Yeah, so her exercise rider, traveling assistant, Karina McLean, Donata Lanny came up with the idea to allow her to walk her in. And obviously, I'm not the only person that has a sentimental attachment to her, the groom, Peter Lopez, Karina, who's ridden her throughout her career, right? You spend so much time with these horses. And for this particular filly, she had a little, she had quirks in her. Like, she wasn't easy. When we, as a 2-year-old, when we first were kind of educating her in the gate, the one day I thought she almost killed herself in there. She took a complete wreck, and luckily she escaped uninjured. And I remember calling Donato and said, man, we almost lost this horse today, and then her race in the Woodbine Oaks, took a fit in the paddock, lost a shoe, and then we had to pull the other shoe off. It was just like a disaster, and
didn't she kick someone in the chest as well that day?
Well, the paddock blacksmith was trying to get the shoe off, and she nailed him. And luckily, the outrider, some of these outriders are cowboys, right? So luckily he was there, because he's probably the only one that was going to get them off anyways. And lucky for him, and a bottle of Crown Royal afterwards, that he was able to get that shoe off, and she was allowed to run.
So she ran with no shoes on in the Woodbine Oaks?
In behind, correct.
In behind,
yeah.
Wow.
And wins by 10 3/4, right?
What a man.
Yeah, pretty impressive horse, pretty special horse. So, like I said, to me, I've called her a generation horse. She's obviously Canada's queen. Probably one of the best Canadian breds, I think, to step on a racetrack. Definitely in recent time. Obviously, the third Canadian bred to win a Queen's Plate Breeders' Cup, and the two before her, awesome again, Dan Smartley. Do you need to say more?
Mm-hmm. Kevin, actually, the betting public thought that she was your second best horse in the race. Full Count Felicia was actually a little bit lower in the odds, 5.50 to 1 versus 5.80 to 1 for Moira. You never would have answered this question before the race, but maybe now that it's over, you will. Did you prefer one or the other? And deep down, do you think this is going to be Moira's race more so than Full Count Felicia's?
So ironically, I hate looking at the odds board when I'm in the paddock, and I kept glancing, and Full Count Felicia was getting a ton of respect, and she deserved it. Her race in the EP Taylor was pretty impressive, but I kept looking at Moira and thinking, how is Moira, higher? And she's 5-6 to 1, hovering around then, and I've always said this, Moira has always, to me, not gotten the respect she deserves. And, you look at her campaign this year, coming off of an 8-month layoff, I think, into the Diana, trying to track a slow pace, just gets beat to White Beam. Comes back in the Beverly D, with a good performance against a multiple Grade 1 winner that have kind of a rivalry going, Fev Rover. The EP Taylor was a unique race. It just, Full Count Felicia opens up by 19, and there's 4 other horses sitting there tracking in a group, and it was kind of over from the time the gates open. And then obviously in the Breeders' Cup, even my friend Randy here, 9 times out of 10, comment about Cinderella's Dream. I have to throw it in there, Randy. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Again, just doesn't get the respect she deserves. You look at the race in the Breeders' Cup. Flavian gave her a great ride, put her in a great spot. Was cognizant of the fact that the pace was slow and had to kind of gear her up a little bit. And when he did, I'm thinking, whoa, we're going a little too soon here, because I know they're coming running, right? So, but luckily enough, he's sitting on such a good horse where I think she's able to shut off again and then kind of be called on again and re-rally. And that's exactly, to me, what she did. He made that early move, kind of sat there 3 wide. And then when the time was right, he kind of got the jump, and she was the best horse.
Yep, that might have been the difference between her and Cinderella's Dream, the fact that she can make the multiple moves like that and find the holes when she needed to. And in the previous year's Breeders' Cup, she was the best of the North American horses in there. Yeah. And Spiral and Warm Heart ran 1-2. And she even had a little bit of early trouble in that race coming past the stands.
Definitely stumbled going into that kind of as soon as they crossed that dirt patch in that race. And let's face it, if both Inspiral and Warm Heart are in this race on Saturday, they're first and second choice respectively. Leading into that race, it wasn't smooth for Moira. It was typical Moira fashion. some antics going on. Literally wasn't sure if we were even going to make it to the race on that Saturday last year. And, again, I've cried a lot of tears with this horse because she's done it to me. And I remember calling Donato Lanni and telling him, I'm not sure we're going to make this race. And sure enough, she was good to go that morning and ran the race of her life. Probably her career effort, actually. Even though she didn't win, I think it was her career best.
So with all the personality that she has and all the challenges that she's given you to train, you made another comment about her personality that I found pretty interesting when you said that unlike any other horse you've ever trained, you can see the difference in her on a race day compared to her ordinary personality. Explain that for people that might not understand that.
Yeah. So, on a regular day, when you get her ready to kind of go out and train in the mornings, you can put the saddle on easy. You can throw the bridle over her head very easy. On race day, after, let's say 12 p.m., anytime after 12 p.m., you try to put that bridle on, she just knows it's game time. And, it's a fight, getting it on her. Getting the tongue tie on, I try to, with these retention areas that you've got to go into before the race. I don't want to tie their tongues for an hour before they run. So I try to leave it off as long as possible, even knowing that it'd be easier to do it in the stall. But for her sake and her well-being, I hold off as long as possible. And then trying to get that on, sometimes it's like, we may not even get this on her now. So she just knows on race day she's doing something different. And we've even tried to trick her. We've literally put the saddle on her before sending her over just to try to trick her into thinking she's just going out to train. And still, she's just smarter than we are. She knows, and she's just a real cool horse, a real special horse, and just a top performer that was so consistent and brought in each and every time.
And that they say a real trainer can think outside of the box, and that is definitely thinking out of the box with all that explanation. Where's she going? Has she left?
I'm not 100% sure. I heard there's a possibility of her going to Australia, but I haven't been able to have that confirmed yet. It seems like, and unfortunately for me, and obviously everyone who loves her, that it sounds like she may be going overseas, which makes it a little bit more difficult, obviously, to follow her and to kind of visit, right? Because for me, she's obviously the best horse I've had and somebody that you just don't forget about and don't want to ever see again, right? So I guess wherever she ends up, it just gives me a reason or an excuse to visit. So that'll be the case.
What was your immediate thought when she crossed the wire? Like, what went through your brain at that very moment when you realized you'd won the Breeders' Cup?
Obviously, just the joy and excitement of winning a Breeders' Cup race. But at the same token, this plan was put in place last year.
Yeah.
After she went through the Fasig-Tipton sale and was brought back. And Donato Lanni really believed that this filly was a grade 1 winner. And he said, we're not going to give up until we win a grade 1.
Wow.
And we worked backwards. He said, we're going back to the Breeders' Cup. It's at Del Mar. It's a little further. And we obviously thought that the extra distance was going to be to her advantage. So we worked our way backwards. Realistically, we got started a little later than we had anticipated. She had a little hiccup in her winter training early in the year that required us to kind of give her a little bit more time. But at the end of the day, I think it all worked out well. She had 3 races before the Breeders' Cup. They were well spaced. Fortunately enough for us too, the EP Taylor this year at Woodbine was moved earlier into the meet, which gave us a little more time than typical in our last 2 years anyways, right, where we've done the EP Taylor Breeders' Cup prep type thing. So I thought that was going to also play to our advantage, just giving her a little bit more time to freshen up. And, it's funny, you make a lot of plans in horse racing, 9 times out of 10, they don't work out. But today or on Saturday, this time it did.
Kevin, unquestionably, she's the best horse in Canada, no doubt about that. But she's not eligible for any of the Canadian awards because you have to run 3 times in Canada to be eligible for that. I can see a scenario where she might win an Eclipse Award, but be shut out in the Sovereign Awards. Do you think that's a good rule?
I don't, to be honest. Unfortunately, the criteria, as you mentioned, for the Sovereign Award, she is not eligible. I'm hoping that the Jockey Club of Canada that looks after the Sovereign Awards does something to honor and recognize her. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the 7th Canadian bred to win a Breeders' Cup race in the history of Breeders' Cup racing. So I think that alone tells you the significance and how important of a Canadian bred she is. And, as you said, I think as it stands right now, she has a very good opportunity or a chance to become the Eclipse Award winner. And, I think, it's almost like the story, even though it seems over, it's quite not yet over because, I think, obviously, if she were lucky enough to win the Eclipse, who would have ever imagined when Donato Lanny put this group together to buy a Canadian bred to win a Queen's Plate race? And here we are winning a Breeders' Cup and now possibly an Eclipse Award. Like, how surreal is that? It's just, I almost want to pinch myself and think, hey, am I dreaming? Right. So, but this is why we work 7 days a week, get up early in the morning and do what we love.
Yeah, it really is. Do you want to tell us just a little bit how you got started? Because, you're born into a family of trainers. The Attard family just is spread everywhere.
Yeah. So, luckily for me, obviously, I was born into this. My father was a trainer. Still trains. I have uncles that are trainers, cousins that are trainers. One uncle is a Hall of Fame trainer, a jockey that is in the Hall of Fame. I think we have a pedigree of horse racing, to say. I was raised on a farm, growing up as a kid, north of Woodbine. Most kids my age, summer times were spent playing baseball or soccer, winters playing hockey. I was either mucking stalls or turning left, right? So, and it's, anybody that works with horses knows that it becomes in your DNA. It just runs through your veins. You love the horses, you love the game, the adrenaline rush of winning. It's just crazy how addicted we get to it, right? And, when I was younger, I wanted to be a jockey because those are the guys that get all the fame and glory, right? And then obviously as I got older and realized I'm going to eat my way out of that job, I'm going to, training was the next thing I wanted to do. And, I always had confidence and believed in myself. My dad was very successful in the late 80s and 90s. And I remember that was probably the pivotal point as a kid where I kind of said to myself, this is exactly what I want to do. And I want to be the best. And, I remember, attending my first Sovereign Awards for my dad as a leading candidate for the trainer in 1986. And he got shut out and, I was so disappointed, and it just kind of ripped my heart out of my chest for my dad, right? Because he's taught me everything I've known, and been a great mentor for me, great teacher. And I vowed that day that one day I would win that award. Mm-hmm. And still haven't. I'm hoping that one day that will come to kind of fruition, I guess. But I love what I do. It's not an easy job. lot of highs and lows, but luckily right now, I'm on top of the world, really.
I bet you are, Kevin. What a great story. And it's nice to see that she came through on her third try in the Breeders' Cup Distaff and what was going to be, Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, what was going to be her last race. Then sells for all the money. What a great ending to the story of Moira, who has been so much fun to watch all these years. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Much appreciated. Thank you for having me on.
And it is the best name in horse racing, by the way, for those of you that have never seen Schitt's Creek. It's Moira. Bill, are you not a fan, Bill?
No.
It's Moira.
Okay.
It's the best show ever, right, Kevin?
Yeah. So if I'm going to be completely honest, I have never watched an episode.
Oh,
But I will. I have to now.
You have to. It's brilliant.
To. Yes.
You have to.
I will.
As always, the TDN Writers Room also brought to you by Pennsylvania Breds, the PHBA, the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association, Pennsylvania's premier 2-year-old $100,000 Pennsylvania Bred Stakes are scheduled now for Wednesday, November 27th at 2 different tracks. The Pennsylvania Nursery for 2-year-olds will be held at Parks, while the Shamrock Rose Stakes for the 2-year-old fillies will take place at Penn National. Nominations for both those races close on Wednesday, November 13th, 2 weeks out before the race. To learn more about the PA Bred program, go to pabred.com, or you can call them at 610-444-1050.
PA Bred, I think we've built a brand at this point.
It's excitement at every step.
Roses for Deborah just set a new track record.
On average, for the past decade, Pennsylvania paid over $28 million a year in Breeders' Awards, restricted races, and owner bonuses. Plus, PA Bred shine on the world's biggest stage. Just 3 states have bred more Breeders' Cup winners. Learn more at pabred.com.
With some of the fullest fields in the country and quality racing year-round, there's never been a better time to reap the rewards of breeding and racing in Kentucky. Purse money in Kentucky is at an all-time high, as is average purse per race, outpacing California, Florida, and New York. Kentucky Breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
On Breeders' Cup weekend at Del Mar in Breeders' Cup races, there were 7 winners bred in the United States. To no one's surprise, all of them bred in the state of Kentucky, including Sierra Leone in the Classic and Thorpedo Anna in the Distaff. You can find your next Kentucky bred at the Keeneland November sale, which is currently running. It began Tuesday, and it will go through next Wednesday, November the 13th. Kentucky Breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
Well, it wasn't just the Classic on Breeders' Cup Day. Some real memorable races and some great performances. And when we opened the show, I said that my favorite race was the Distaff because of Thorpedo Anna. It really wasn't a very dramatic race by any stretch of the imagination. She was one of the biggest favorites in Breeders' Cup history. We all say, wow, what a race it could have been if Idiomatic and Adair Manor had both stayed healthy and wanted to get into it. But Kenny McPeak, what a good job he's done with this horse. And he's got this horse in a position now. She will be Horse of the Year. The first NTRA poll came out today, post Breeders' Cup, and she's got 26 first place votes. Sierra Leone has 3. So that race is not even going to be close. She's coming back next year. She's a cool horse. Love to see her go out there and do her thing. And maybe she'll even run the Classic next year. You never know. But, she didn't dazzle you, but she didn't need to. She went out, got the job done. See you next year.
Yeah, it's a shame the race fell apart to the extent that it did. And we had Adair Manor drops out before the pre-entries were taken. And then after the pre-entries, of course, we were going to get that big matchup with Idiomatic and Thorpedo Anna. And then that fell through and Idiomatic dropped out. And then it was going to be Thorpedo Anna against the Japanese filly, Awesome Result, undefeated. And then Awesome Result drops out the morning of the race. I mean, just one by one by one by one, it just fell apart. And then you're left with Thorpedo Anna at 2-5. Tied for the shortest price favorite in the history of the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So she did what she was supposed to do, and she did it the right way. Raging Sea, who beat Idiomatic 2 races back, again fired what I thought to be her best shot and she just wasn't good enough. She gave it everything she had, tried to keep up with Thorpedo Anna early and late, but Thorpedo was just too good. And, even though I think you might be able to say that the Travers could have taken a little bit out of Thorpedo Anna. Her subsequent 2 races weren't quite as dominating. She still wins. She just wins. And I think she would be a very deserving horse of the year.
That was without a doubt a B performance for her on Saturday, but without a doubt, she wins horse of the year. There's no question there. And I think Kenny McPeak echoed it when he simply called it workmanlike. That's all he said. It was a workmanlike effort, and that's what it was. It's been a long season. She's danced every dance. Not only does she dance in the afternoon, I mentioned it last week, she dances in the morning. She's not easy on herself or 72-year-old Danny Ramsey. She's very hard on herself, and that's hard to do for 12 months of the year. So hopefully she gets a little break and we get to see her next year. I mean, the question is, where are they going to start her? Are they going to do the usual? Are we going to the Apple Blossom? That's kind of like the usual thing for the older fillies and mares?
Maybe the Beholder Mile too.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see.
All right. So other races of note through the first 2 days of the Breeders' Cup. Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies won by Immersive, and she lived up to the hype. She's really good. 4 for 4 right now, 3 grade ones. But I thought the real story here was Brad Cox, and he has won a Breeders' Cup race 7 straight years. I'm sure that, Randy, that is a record, isn't it? It's got to be. Yeah. And the consistency of this stable and for it to continue to just pound out these really good horses is really remarkable. And it's a tip of the cap to Brad Cox. But again, when Godolphin is giving you horses, probably, the 8th leading trainer at Wakapai Downs could win with them. So, but no, I shouldn't have said that because Brad Cox is just doing an absolute great job. Mercive is a lot of fun. She's going to be the early favorite for the Kentucky Oaks. If she stays healthy, I think she should have a tremendous year next year.
It wasn't the prettiest juvenile fillies that I've watched. Now, I don't want to say anything about fractions because God knows they might be wrong. But according to what I have, the final quarter was 27.58. They were walking home. They went fast early, 22:44 and 9.9, 45 flat, way quicker than the boys did. The boys wound up running a little bit faster than the girls, but they walked home. It wasn't pretty to watch, even though she's very physically pretty to watch. It looked like a struggle fest coming down to the wire.
Yeah, the final quarter was slow. I don't think it was quite as slow as what the fractional times would indicate, since the fractional times are wrong. It's a shame.
Can I drink to that? Are we playing the drinking game? Drink.
It's a shame that we're at this point in thoroughbred racing in 2024. But I was of the opinion going in that the 2-year-old fillies were on the weak side. I thought, therefore, it was probably a good idea to try to take a shot against Immersive, which turned out to be the wrong thing to do. She was a dominant winner. She's clearly the best of the 2-year-old fillies that we've seen so far. Yes. I'm kind of expecting, somebody to come into the forefront between now and Kentucky Oaks time. But yeah, Immersive has done nothing wrong and was clearly much, much the best. As far as Brad Cox, Bill, it was, obviously the longest active streak of, consecutive years with at least one Breeders' Cup win. Chad Brown had won a race 6 consecutive years from 2014 through 2019 inclusive. So this broke that tie that Brad Cox had with Chad Brown. And in the NBC interview afterward, he was familiar with that. He knew exactly that there was a tie and that he was now holding the record. But that's remarkable. Yeah, 7 years in a row with at least one Breeders' Cup win.
So let's turn to the boys in the juvenile. How about the things you never expect? Bob Baffert runs 1-2 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and the exacta pays $142.20 with Citizen Bull getting the job done. We talked about, Randy, again, you got me so nervous about talking about the paces because you're just going to, that's all wrong. But the difference in this race, clearly was how slow they went early. The official fractions were 23-2, 47-4, 112-1. And Citizen Bull, I don't think he's a superstar. He'll be named the 2-year-old champion. I guarantee you come Derby time, there'll be better Bob Baffert horses into the picture. But you let a good horse like that get that kind of trip. It was like, they ran 1-2 around the racetrack. Bob Baffert's other horse, Gaming, ran second the whole way around. Some disappointments. Jonathan's Way was 7th. Chancellor McPatrick was 6th. But, Bob Baffert came through and at a time where people, at least the bettors, didn't believe in his horses.
Oh, it was all that. The way that race was run, what happened in that race was totally a result of what happened at the start when East Avenue went to his nose, leaving the starting gate from post position number 1 and was last a few strides out of the gate. That was the horse that, especially in hindsight, was going to set the pace, probably control the pace, and in my opinion, probably win the race. Although, it must be said, Citizen Bull's final time, 143.07, and the final times are accurate at the Breeders' Cup, was so much faster than the Juvenile fillies ran. I mean, he ran a really good race. Now, he had everything his own way. The fractions were even a little bit slower than what was posted. And I agree with you, Bill, in one thing you said. A friend of mine said, it looks like Bob's going to be loaded for the Kentucky Derby next year. He'll be back at the Derby in force. And I said, yeah, he probably will be back at the Derby in force. And he probably will have at least 2 horses that are front and center among the leading contenders for the Kentucky Derby. And I'll be willing to bet you right now that none of these 3 in the Breeders' Cup will be one of those horses that we'll be talking about going into the Kentucky Derby.
Citizen Bull did what he was supposed to do. He went to the lead. Martin, his 4th Breeders' Cup win, the 8th for the sire, Into Mischief. That cross is really good, by the way. Into Mischief, Distorted Humor. That's a very, very good cross. Did what he was supposed to do. 1st, 2nd, and 4th for Baffert. So the top 3 in the superfecta. According to some quotes from Chad Brown, Chancellor Patrick never got hold of the track, which, is a normal thing, and was confused with the second turn. I know that Pratt was riding his horse because I watched a replay back to beat East Avenue because he was on East Avenue. He thought the horse to beat the whole way down the backside. He had him hemmed in, and he just didn't have any horse. Meanwhile, I saw the first fraction for Garcia and Baffert, but they're not beating this horse on the lead. He's walking the dog. It was literally after the first quarter. Here you go, Martin. Here's another Breeders' Cup. Well done, young man. Well done. There you go. Handed to him on a plate.
So you mentioned the 8th winner for Sire Into Mischief. There's now a 4-way tie at the top of the Breeders' Cup sire standings. Curlin already had 8. Dubawi won another race for Charlie Appleby. He now has 8. And the late More Than Ready had a winner. He now has 8. So that's a little race within a race going on for the top sire in Breeders' Cup history.
How about juveniles and their sires winning? Because Immersive, Nyquist won in 2015 as well. That's going to be a stat going down the road.
Let's turn our attention to the Breeders' Cup Turf. Rebels Romance, what a nice horse he is. Won in 2022. He's a gelding, so he's still around. He's going to probably be around for another couple of years. And boy, does this tell you the tale of modern horse racing. This has been his campaign. Qatar to United Arab Emirates to Hong Kong, to Great Britain, to Germany, back to the U.S., back to California. I played around with the numbers. This is very Randy Moss-esque, but I had to do it. I looked up the distance between all these different places. And, you don't know exactly where he went. For instance, did he go back to England between Hong Kong and et cetera? But just if he went from one place to another, bing, 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 he traveled 20,188 miles this year. And he
wouldn't have because they like to take them home in between.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So more.
And, just a cool horse. It was nice to see him win, get back in there. Again, how long can you can't keep Charlie Appleby and Godolphin down. Not the best race. The Americans are so over their heads in this race now. I don't know. Can't imagine them winning it anytime soon, the way things are happening. But Rebels Romance gets the job done.
Just an absolute legend of a horse. And that was a quote from Charlie Appleby. But he was not the best horse in the race. Not by a long way. I bet on Rauschen Park. I watched him train in the week. Did you watch the ride on Rowsham Park? If anybody ever, Bill, if you'd have ridden him, you'd have probably won on Rowsham Park. Broke slow, stayed in last, wrestled back to last. They're going down the backside at the 3/4 pole. He almost clips heels, and he's last. Wrestles him back and gets him back last again. Going around the final turn, he's got his feet on the dashboard. He goes 10 wide. Rebels Romance is on the inside path, and he gets beat. What a neck. And he almost cut off his stablemate. The third place finisher, different trainer, same ownership group, Sunday Racing, Shahryar, almost cut him off as well. He was so much the best, it's not even funny. Do I sound like a sore loser?
No. I mean, while I'm pissing everybody else off, including Kevin Attard, I might as well just say the two worst rides at the Breeders' Cup were Christophe Lemaire on Rewsham Park and Irad Ortiz on Cogburn. He apparently thought the finish line was at the 8th pole instead of where it was, or Cogburn would have won the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. But, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, maybe City of Troy would have won this race if he was in here, but I doubt it. Rebels Romance and Rewsham Park gave us quite a thrill there, but Rewsham Park, I agree with you. I thought he was probably the best horse.
Ooh, I'm delighted. Honestly, I am delighted for Rebels Romance. We do need to mention condolences out to the connections of JRB, who sadly appeared to have a cardiac event on the backside. So that was very, very sad indeed. But Rebel Romance, 6 years old. What a horse he is.
Cool story.
Well, we talked a lot with Kevin Attard about the British Cup filly and Mare Turf. I was really happy. He's one of the real good guys in racing. And, that there was a horse that really, she deserved this. She's been trying so hard and knocking on the door all these years. And now finally gets in her third try at Breeders' Cup filly and Mare Turf. Zoe, do you think she'll be the Eclipse Award winner?
I don't know. I'd have to.
Do you think about who, if not her, who else?
Honestly, there's not a big standout in that division, so you have to think about it very, very hard. Honestly, before the race, I hadn't even considered her an Eclipse Award winner, but I'm definitely going to take another look at it. Mm-hmm. She was terrific, and it was great to hear all the stories from Kevin about how persnickety she is. She sounds like she's a proper madam to train, and I love that. Love that. She's probably going to be one of those old broodmares that chases you out the field.
Yeah, that. I'm going to vote for her, I think, for champion turf female. I mean, I think she deserves it. What Kevin took exception to with me was what I said on NBC in the immediate aftermath of the race, which I'll stand by, that if the race was run 10 times, Cinderella's Dream would probably win 9 of them. She had traffic problems most of the way down the lane. And then she finally got loose and was flying at the end and just got beat in there with William Buick aboard. But, I was happy to see Moira win just because of the storyline behind her, the most popular horse in Canada, deserving, going out, final race in her career. Cinderella's Dream's a 3-year-old. She can be back next year for Charlie Appleby. So I was really, I thought it was cool, especially now that we've talked to Kevin and we've seen all the emotions involved with Moira and what kind of horse she is around the barn.
And listen, it takes some serious balls to RNA a mare for $3 million. When you pay $150,000 for her and you're like, yeah, no, $3 million, no, thank you. We're going to keep her another year and run her as a 5-year-old. Like, that takes some balls, giant cojones.
And then you get the $1 million purse, and then you sell her for $4.3 million 2 days later. Yeah, good decision by Donato Lanni.
Yeah, well done, Donato. One more race I wanted to touch on really quickly was the sprint and the Soul of an Angel.
All right, go for it, Zoe.
Well, I mean, I just thought it was a really good story because I was on Vava. I thought she couldn't lose. And just to watch her come down the middle of the track with Drayden Van Dyke, who moved his tack to Florida, great young guy, good rider, was dead in the water in California, and Safi gave him a shot. And they're all praising God, which is fine, to win on a filly called Soul of an Angel. I thought it was just a really cool story. And I'm delighted for Drayden and Safi, especially because he didn't get his Breeders' Cup win last year.
And she probably shouldn't have been the price that she was when you go back and look at her two most recent one-turn races, one of which she just demolished Randomized at a one-turn mile. And Randomized was clicking on all cylinders at the time and is obviously a really good filly from the Chad Brown barn. So should she have been the favorite? No, but she probably should have been the price she was.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by xbtv. This week's Work of the Week is Slider, who breezed 5 furlongs in 102 and 4 on November the 1st at Santa Anita. Slider was the winner of the Speakeasy Stakes in 2023, but was 9th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Then he ran 3rd in the San Vicente before having a long break to start off this year. He was 3rd last time out on his return to racing in the Keeneland allowance, and trainer John Sadler said he will be hunting for a Del Mar allowance race for the West Point runner next time out. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
Be a smarter, better with XBTV. The best horses. With thousands of exclusive morning workouts. All at your fingertips and delivered right into your inbox. Everything you need to be informed. Be smart. Bet smart with XBTV.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
TDN Writers Room also brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds. Now that the Breeders' Cup is in our rearview mirror, West Point can look ahead to an exciting weekend coming up with 4 horses in stakes races all on the grass. See, if you were part of West Point, this is what you could do. Friday, you would have Don't Look Back at All running in the Autumn Day Stakes at Aqueduct. Then on Saturday, you could get your big screen TV in the living room and you could do the picture-in-picture thing. And you could put horse racing on one side and college football on the other side, right? And at 1:40 p.m., you could watch the Hill Prince Stakes and West Point's Cugino, all right, with Flavien Prat aboard. Then at 3:40 p.m., you could watch Integration run in the Red Smith. That's the Arlington Million runner-up, also with Flavien Prat. And then at 5:25, you could watch West Point's entrant in the River City Stakes at Churchill. Flavien couldn't make it down there in time. Luan Machado will ride Battle of Normandy in the River City Stakes there. The last 3 all trained by Shug McGahee. That's the update on West Point. To learn more, visit www.westpointtb.com.
So I thought one of the good stories to come out of this Breeders' Cup is that we're going to see some of the stars back next year. Mike Napoli has already said that Fierceness is definitely going to run next year if he stays healthy. The Sierra Leone people, the Coolmore bunch, didn't think there'd be a prayer that he'd come back next year. They haven't said for sure, but they were certainly talking like a group that wants to see their horse come back next year. Thorpedo Anna will be back next year, Forever Young. Mystic Dan, who even remembers him, he won the Kentucky Derby. He'll be back next year. And I want to give credit to Mike Rapoli about Fierceness, too, because, he's the guy that's coming up and saying there's all these things wrong with horse racing. And one of the things wrong with horse racing is that these horses are retired too early. And so, Mike put his heart in front of his wallet and decided to bring this horse back for another year. Plus all the other horses coming up through the ranks. But we could have the big if is always if they stay healthy. But the big if they stay healthy, we could see some really nice racing next year, maybe in the Saudi Cup, maybe in the Pegasus World Cup. But I'm glad to see that some people are bucking the trend and bringing their horses back to race next year.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, Fierceness and Sierra Leone will be fabulous. I can only imagine. Fierceness looks so much better leading up to the Breeders' Cup than I've ever seen him. Next year as a 4-year-old, he's going to be outstanding. At Sierra Leone, he's always looked good. He just needs pace. We've established that now. He's always looked like a 4-year-old. But it's going to be exciting.
And hopefully we'll get Sierra Leone back as a 4-year-old. Have they officially announced it yet? The last I saw, it was still sort of TBD.
I think so. Yeah, I think it is. But it certainly sounded like they
word
wanted
on the
to do
street is yes, but I don't want to be the,
Okay. Well, that
I
makes
don't want
sense.
to piss off Coolmore, I'll leave that to
you don't want to do that, Zoe. You never want to do that. I mean, so that makes sense since City of Troy's being retired to stud. And by the way, that was another one of the fun aspects of the Breeders' Cup Classic. The fact that City of Troy failed for Coolmore, but then at the same time, Coolmore wins the Classic as the co-owner with Peter Brandt, Sierra Leone, and it made for a pretty unusual winner's circle. They didn't know whether to celebrate or whatever. But then even Forever Young, the trainer said in the aftermath of the Classic, in third place finish, that he was looking forward to running in next year's Classic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and Mystic Dan. Apparently, Mystic Dan is being tentatively pointed for the Pegasus World Cup. So we're potentially, if all goes well, like you said, knock on wood, we could have a lot of superstars going next year.
Yeah, certainly could. Well, what about the Japanese going into the Breeders' Cup? They brought a huge contingent. A lot of people were very high on them. Randy, I think I got the number right. They were 0 for 15. Correct me if I'm wrong. I jotted that down very quickly. They did have a second with Rushin Park, as Zoe talked about, in the same race in the Breeders' Cup Turf with Sharia. And in the Classic, Forever Young ran great to finish third. But I'm sure the Japanese as a whole were pretty disappointed by their performance on Breeders' Cup Day.
Yeah, after the scratch of awesome result, they actually had 18 in all with no wins, 1 second, and 2/3. And that is a huge disappointment for the Japanese, even though some of their horses ran pretty well. Because on Friday, for example, they had the favorite in the Juvenile Turf Sprint and one of the favorites in the race right after that in the Juvenile fillies. And both of those horses ran very poorly. They had a lot of real disappointments. But they'll be back. They're at the Fasig-Tipton sale on Monday. Out of the 25 mares that were sold for $1 million or more, 9 of them were bought by Japan. The Yoshidas stepped up and bought a. They bought a Dare Manor. A guy named Yoshiyuki bought both McCulloch and Surge Capacity for $6 million and $3.6 million, respectively, to take back to Japan to breed. We're going to be seeing the Japanese at the Breeders' Cup and I think the Kentucky Derby for a long time to come, despite this disappointment.
Yeah, they're just breeding champions already because they started it 15 years ago. This has been a plan for a long, long time. They've been buying these fantastic race mares and taking them back to Japan, and now they're just Fasig-Tipton, Keeneland, it's good stomping grounds. Everybody's here. That was insane last night, some of the prices those mares bought. And we're probably never going to see them again. We'll see the progeny because they're going to come over again. On the whole, I didn't think the Japanese contingent ran too badly. They had some fourths and fifths and horses that actually ran pretty well. If they'd have just had 2 wins, everyone would have been delighted. Mm-hmm. But they brought so many horses over, and I think it was hot on the heels of, what's the trainer, Moira, the fabulous guy with the hat, saying he was the proclaimed king of Del Mar. They saw what he did at Del Mar and thought, this is an easy game. Let's just go with him and we'll all be winners. And it's not quite that easy. I can't see them bringing as many horses next year to Del Mar. But honestly, it wasn't a terrible result by any count. Rauschen Park should have won. Maybe the filly that was scratched, she'd have been right there with Thorpedo Anna. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I don't think it was as terrible as you're making out.
All right. 0 for 18 is pretty terrible to me, but we'll save that for a subject for another day. Another person who had a very good Breeders' Cup was Slavian Prati, won the Shoemaker Award given to the jockey with the best overall performance. He won 2 races, Sierra Leone in the Breeders' Cup Classic and Moira in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. And when Pratt decided to come from California, shift east, he said the reason why he wanted to do it was to win an Eclipse Award. I think he did it this year. I mean, we've got a month and a half to go with the year, but right now, obviously his main competition is A-Rod Ortiz. Ortiz has 268 wins. Pratt has only 202. However, Pratt has earned $34 million, while Irad has earned only $30.3 million. And this is the number that really jumps off the page. Flavien Prat has won 50 graded stakes races this year to only 33 for Irad. So I think people are ready for a new face besides with Irad winning it every single year. I think Flavien Prat pulled off exactly what he intended to do coming here. And he's good, isn't he, Zoe?
Parlez-vous français?
Un peu.
Oh, very good. I'm impressed. Yes, he's damn good. And he's always been good. And he's a good guy. He's got a great agent in Brad Pegram. Brad's a quiet guy. He's not going to shout from the rooftops, and he just goes about his business. He's made good connections. Yes, he does ride a lot for Chad Brown now, but he's not solely riding for Chad Brown. He rides for everyone. And he's always made sure that Flavien is not pigeonholed in one barn. I mean, if Chad calls you, you're going to say no. I mean, he's good on the grass. That's tough to do. But yeah, I'm delighted for him. I really am.
He's just had an unbelievable year, hasn't he? Too many years. I think Eclipse Award voters just look at the earnings, season earnings, and whoever's on top of the season earnings standings, they vote as champion jockey. And it's typically Irad Ortiz. Now, right now, because of the Breeders' Cup Classic and because of the filly and Mare Turf, Flavien Prat has leapfrogged over Irad Ortiz, and he's currently at the top of the earnings standings. But even if Irad moves back ahead of Prat by the end of the year and earns more money than Prat, look, if Flavien Prat's if he doesn't win the Eclipse Award for champion jockey, I mean, I'm going to pull a Donald Trump and claim that the vote was rigged. Hey, I
got a wig for you. You need a wig?
Yeah, I'll be orange. But look, I mean, to me, it's a slam dunk. And we're just sitting here in early November. We still got 2 months to go. But Flavien Prat's had such a good year that this has got to be his Eclipse Award.
Okay. I've been looking forward to this part of the show ever since we started, because Randy is just, he's loaded. He's means business. We'll call this segment Randy's Rant. Go, my friend.
You talking about the timing?
Yeah.
You're talking about time. Of course you're talking about the time. Well, look, the final times of the Breeders' Cup races are accurate. And they were also accurate in 2021. The last time the Breeders' Cup was at Del Mar. But when we had the Breeders' Cup in 2021, and I've talked about it since then, the fractional times that day, which are timed by GPS, a horribly inaccurate GPS system, were just wrong. And now, 3 years later, it still hasn't changed. The fractional times at Del Mar are still done by GPS, and they're still wrong. And now they're not horribly, horribly wrong, but 2/5 of a second, 1/5 of a second. When you're talking about fractional times, when you're talking about data that people are betting millions of dollars on, there's no excuse for not having data that is absolutely accurate. It's not Del Mar's fault. Del Mar is totally dependent on the timing system that Equibase and the Jockey Club gives them. Okay. And to Equibase's credit, they kicked GPS to the side for final times and went back to the old beam technology to get accurate final times. But when you're watching races just on a normal day and you're watching those chiclets on the screen that supposedly tell you where the horses are and they're placed, and you're watching it and you're saying, what the hell is this? I mean, this horse is in front and it's got him fourth, right? You see that all the time. That's the same technology that's being used to time fractional times in our championship races. It should have been fixed a long time ago. They've got to do a full court press to get this fixed. It's an embarrassment to thoroughbred racing that this is still going on. If we want to be a big league sport like the NFL, right? Tom Brady had 505 yards passing in the Super Bowl, 52 when they lost to the Eagles. The NFL doesn't say, well, maybe it was 475. Maybe it was 525. It's close enough. We'll just make it 505. You can't have that and be a big league sport. And hopefully it will be fixed sooner, much sooner rather than later. That's my rant.
What are you timing it on that makes you know it's right?
You can do it. And actually, with all the controversy right now with the CAW players, computer-assisted wagering players that are betting so much money and that are given the advantage of betting into the pools, they have people on staff that use the same thing I use, video timing. You download the races, you put it on a video timer, frame by frame advance with the time. You can get really close to the time. That's what they're doing. They have that edge too. They're actually getting accurate fractional times to bet with that the average people aren't, because they're relying on what's being published in the paper not at every racetrack, but at the racetracks that are using GPS timing for fractions. And, but yes, I do the same thing. You can use a computer, you can use video timing. There are a handful of us around the country that do that. And you can point out, inaccuracies in the official times.
I just wanted to make sure you weren't sitting there with your stopwatch.
Yeah, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. No. So that's my rant. I have to do it once a year, right?
All right. Well, we'll come back next year because this doesn't sound like anything that the racing is too worried about. And I agree with you, Randy. It's something that needs to change. And it does give racing the look of a little bit of a podunk sport when they can't even time things right. But anyways, enough about that. It was a great Breeders' Cup. I want to thank my co-host, Randy Moss, Zoe Cadman, our guest of the week, Kevin Attard, and our editors and producers, Katie Petruniak, Anthony LaRocca, and Alita LaRocca. Hope everybody had a great Breeders' Cup. We'll see you next week.